Okay, so I thought I'd start this YD2 versus RDX video with a bit of a recap of my YD2. So if you're a follower of the channel, you'll have seen my under the shell. You'll have also seen that I changed my chassis for a more flexible high grip chassis. I've not put any weight back in the car yet, which is what I wanted to do. So I'm still going to continue doing developing that a little bit just to be sure of this challenge. But essentially, what I feel the car's become is quite tight. Quite sort of aggressive, which is really nice in like sort of when you're driving on your own. But I found that it's actually quite hard to chase with, and I didn't cover that in the last video because I was here on my own. But once you come here to a drift night and you're trying to chase somebody, I find it's quite sort of on off, and you, as a chaser, you need to be smooth and you need to be able to push forward when you want to, but also be smooth and stay on angle and all those things. So I did find it harder to chase with since I've changed the chassis. It feels like you're kind of winding it up tight, and then your little sort of tolerance of making mistakes is getting tighter and tighter and tighter, which is making me have to be a better and better driver, and that's great, but I don't know if I'm that good, and that's my challenge. But let's have a little look. I'll do a couple of laps, and then I'll switch over all of the electronics from this car into the RDX. And then we'll see how they feel in comparison. Going to keep the same tyres and going to keep the same wheels on as well, so it's literally going to be a switch from one to the other. Okay, here we go. So it drives nice, it's precise. Like I say, you've just got to be on it with regards to your aggression. Like if you back off even slightly in a corner, you'll find it sometimes starts to straighten up. It can punish you a little bit. But I am used to it. I do really like it as a car, other than hitting that wall. I do really like it as a car, and I would like to continue developing it. But here's the question. Is a quite touched and messed around with YD2 better than a box fresh RDX? So let's switch over the electronics and take a look at the RDX. Okay, so you watched the last video, I imagine, of me building an RDX and then testing an RDX, and my impressions were good. So here lieth the question. I've moved everything over from my YD2. I just drove the YD2 before I put all my stuff into this car. I've moved the wheels over, I've moved the Velinos over. Yes, I know I should probably adjust the rear camber for the Velinos, but you can't do it on the RDX. An interesting point to discuss, unless you change the rear tie rods. But is it better straight off the bat than my YD2, which I've probably had 3 different chassis in. I've had 3 different types of suspension in, upgraded all of the electronics to the same ones that are in this car here, changed the front hubs, all sorts of stuff. So I've done a lot of stuff to that YD2. I did say in the previous video that I think I've actually probably wound it up a little bit tight and I need to relax it a little bit. I definitely think with a bit more development I could do that. I think it was probably driving slightly more in the way that I would like it with my previous chassis when it was a little bit heavier, a little bit sort of cruisier. And I think actually in comparison, we'll see whether we think the YD2 is better than the RDX if fully developed or not. All right, here we go. Okay, so this is an absolutely great chassis. You saw me say it in the video when I built the RDX. The more laps I do with it, the more confident I'm becoming with it. I find it really progressive, really easy to hold a line. You can hold a lot of angle. For a standard car, it holds a lot of angle. Sorry, I'm just trying this new layout as well. It's throwing me a little bit. Hold a lot of angle for a standard car. I do think, straight off the bat, this is a good chassis. I think it drives a bit more like my YD2 did before I changed chassis. I think that that alone is a pretty crazy starting point. To say that I've got a YD2, I've got carbon decks for it, wrap-up knuckles on the front, all adjustable racing arms. I've completely changed the camber and caster and toe settings from the out-of-the-box YD2. So it's not a comparison of a standard YD2 at all. My YD2 definitely drives a lot better than a standard YD2. And this is literally matching it straight out of the box. To say that this would be my starting point and say, right, okay, I might change the knuckles or upgrade more things on this is only going to make this chassis better and better and better. So as a starting point, that's crazy to think that this drives like my last car did before I went all lightweight and maybe a little bit too far, maybe. So I'm going to hold my judgment on this one, and I'm going to come down the club this Sunday when I've got some other drivers here to twin with and to follow with. I know what my YD2 was like to follow other cars. Definitely on the previous chassis, in like little fun competitions with friends here, I was keeping up. You know, I came fourth in one, and that's, yeah, and this is just as a fun competition, it's nothing serious at all. But I definitely think that in its previous guise, my YD2 was of a standard, and I could keep up with people and play with other drivers, and I was fairly competitive at points. Not consistent enough as a driver, but fairly competitive. It'd be really interesting to see this Sunday come in, how the RDX compares to other cars. I'm going to have to put a shell on it for starters, and that might make a slight difference to the weight too. So we're going to pause this. At the moment, I'm thinking the RDX is winning, and that is a scary thought. RDX is winning currently in my mind. I'll talk to you on Sunday after I've driven it and show you some footage of it chasing some people around our circuit. See you in literally...
Okay, so let me overdub this and explain this clip. It was hard to talk about it at the club, and this essentially was made up of Dave starting out chasing me. He's got a Rhino Shark, and it's a fully converted Rhino Shark, which started out quite well. You can see that he's very close to the RDX and chasing it, and found it quite easy to keep up with me, although he's probably a bit of a better driver too, if I'm honest. And then at this point we've now switched over, so I'm trying to keep up with the Rhino Shark with my RDX. Now, I know I'm not keeping up with it. I know he's gapping me around the fast bits, and I definitely could work a little bit more grip into the car. At this point, we have adjusted the rear camber now by changing the rear camber arms, so my Velinos are about 1 degree of camber, so basically trying to get a bit more grip out of the tyres, but he's still gapping me a little bit. However, that said, the rest of the car is completely bone stock, out of the box and set up as the factory suggests. And to say that you can see it here dancing with a Rhino Shark, which is probably an incredibly expensive chassis, says a lot about the RDX. I still think out of the box it is an absolutely fantastic chassis. I'm really surprised about how good it is compared to other cars. I did gather some responses of the rest of the guys. I gave them all a drive of the car, and their thoughts were that the car drove absolutely fine, drove really well, especially when sort of cruising around. It's a really easy car to drive in trains and when driving with other people. But we all found that once you started leaning on it a little bit and tried to drive in more of an aggressive style, that it was a little bit harder to keep the car online, and sometimes you catch it spinning out. Now, I did spend a little bit of time setting up a few more things that I hadn't before later on in the session, things like endpoints and bits that did stop that a little bit, but I think there's definitely a few tweaks to do for the chassis to make it perform at a higher level, to keep up with other people when you're trying to push on them, if you're going to go into things like competitions and be twinning with people. But out the box, absolutely fantastic. To say, like I said before, the starting point is that much higher than the majority of chassis, and you don't have that much tuning to do, means that anybody can get into the cars, give them a good go and move on. Will I keep the YD2? Nope. I'm moving on to the RDX, and the YD2 is getting sold. That concludes the video. Thanks very much for watching.